Welcome back. Today, we're unpacking a massive topic in this explainer, that incredibly fine line between legitimate network marketing and predatory pyramid schemes. It's a boundary that gets crossed way more often than people realize, and honestly, the financial consequences are just devastating. We're going to dive straight into the actual mechanics of these organizations today. We're stripping away the glossy marketing jargon to see what's really going on under the hood. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. Why do so many multi-level marketing structures ultimately collapse? It's not just bad luck, and it is definitely not a lack of hard work from the distributors, even though that's what they're often told. The failure of an MLM typically stems from fundamental mathematical flaws, literal structural vulnerabilities. These setups inherently require a continuous, exponential influx of new recruits just to sustain the payouts for the people at the very top. And when that endless chain of recruitment inevitably slows down because, well, you literally run out of people on planet Earth, the entire structure fractures and collapses.
Now, to really understand that staggeringly high failure rate, we have to look closely at the concept of integrity. But we're not just talking about integrity as a moral buzzword here. In this context, it's a strict operational necessity. Structural integrity means the business actually functions based on the genuine sales of real products to real outside consumers. When an organization loses that specific integrity, it mathematically guarantees its own collapse. Why? Because the revenue stops coming from actual sustainable market demand and starts relying entirely on just squeezing money out of the internal network of distributors.
So let's break this down further in our first section, the MLM failure rate.
You're likely already familiar with the baseline structure here. A standard multi-level marketing business model allows independent reps to earn commissions not just from their personal sales, but from the sales made by the recruits they bring in, their downline. That's the baseline. But the vulnerability? That lies in the incentive structure itself. Because commissions multiply as your downline grows, the primary focus almost always shifts completely away from actually selling products to outside customers. Instead, it becomes entirely about recruiting new distributors. Grasping this shift in incentives is absolutely key to understanding how these systems break down. Which brings us right to Section 2, the prohibited action. So what exactly triggers that systemic collapse we just talked about? Well, it almost always comes down to something defined in the industry as the prohibited action. This happens when an organization, whether they say it out loud or just imply it, mandates that participants buy vast amounts of inventory just to stay eligible for their commissions. It's a practice usually called inventory loading, or it's the act of compensating distributors primarily for recruiting others rather than for actual retail sales. When an MLM engages in these specific, prohibited actions, they've abandoned sustainable commerce. They've crossed the fatal line into an endless recruitment loop. Beyond the pyramid scheme gets right at the heart of the nuance here. We aren't just talking about blatant, obvious scams where there's literally no product being sold at all. We're investigating the gray area. We're looking at seemingly legitimate businesses that have physical products, but quietly, subtly manipulate their compensation plans to prioritize internal recruiting. It's those nuanced shifts in how the money flows that can push a totally legally operating business right over the boundary line and turn it into a prohibited scheme. Let's move to Section 3 to clarify this further. MLM versus pyramid scheme. When you compare an MLM and a pyramid scheme side by side, the defining difference really boils down to one simple metric: the source of the revenue. In a legitimate MLM, the absolute lifeblood of the company is the sale of products to genuine retail customers, people who are completely outside the distributor network. But in a pyramid scheme, the revenue comes primarily from the required internal purchases of the distributors themselves. Listen, if the business would immediately collapse without the constant mandated purchases of its own internal workforce, you're no longer looking at an MLM. You are straight up looking at a pyramid scheme. So think about this. What if the MLM you're looking at right now is actually a pyramid scheme, just hiding in plain sight? The real-world consequences of this are devastating. When a structure like this is finally exposed, whether by regulators or just the sheer mathematical impossibility of infinite growth, it collapses instantly. And it's the people at the very bottom, meaning the vast majority of everyone involved, who lose their entire investments. Meanwhile, the very few at the top walk away with the accumulated capital. Recognizing this reality is absolutely critical. And that leads us to our final core section, addressing the issues. To actually navigate this landscape in the real world, we've got a clear, actionable roadmap for you. Step 1 is gaining that deep understanding of structural failure, really knowing the math behind market saturation. Step 2 is identifying the prohibited action. For example, if you see a company heavily pushing $1,000 starter packs while completely ignoring actual retail strategies, yeah, you've spotted the red flag. Step 3 is addressing the issue directly. That means calling out the lack of external sales and flat out refusing to participate in systems that require you to recruit your friends and family just to break even. So the huge takeaway here is that you now possess the analytical toolkit to evaluate any network marketing opportunity out there. You know that deep structural flaws cause the failure, not a lack of personal hustle. You know exactly how to spot those prohibited actions, like inventory loading and recruitment-heavy comp plans. And you know how to draw a hard, definitive line between a retail-driven business and an illegal, internally funded pyramid scheme. You are fully equipped to protect yourself and others from these predatory practices.
Now that you understand the hidden mechanics behind these structures, how are you going to address these issues when you encounter them in the real world? When the next pitch comes your way, will you look past the glossy marketing and interrogate the actual source of the revenue? Challenge the structure, demand hard evidence of outside retail sales. Use this knowledge to ensure the operations you interact with actually maintain true structural integrity. Keep asking those tough questions, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next explainer.